Uh-huh. I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box, and you cannot compare them at all. So don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. It is Friday. We are hot into week 2 of the NFL preseason. Game started last night with the Browns and the Eagles doing battle. More games tonight. My team, the Broncos, playing the 49ers tomorrow, so I don't know what to make of that. But we are going to be giving you our redraft tight end rankings today, looking 1 to 25. We also have a couple of news items. But first, Dennis, how was your week? How are you springing into week 2 of the preseason?
It's a surreal kind of day. 18 years in the making. We dropped the boy off at college, and not sure how I feel about it because it's very quiet, and he's not. So I'm used to wondering, when's he going to come bursting through the door, talking some shit, doing something? Oh, out of bounds. Sorry, I got the Falcons and Bengals on. We met. He made a friend at orientation that he ran into today that we actually had lunch with. That seems like a really nice kid. He's from Cleveland. We met one of his roommates. It's going to be interesting to kind of see how that whole thing with four guys, gels, knowing the strength of my son's personality and just how loud he is. Like, he's never had apartment living, and for most of his life, we've lived on a concrete slab with no second floor. And so he's a noisy son of a gun, just noisy. But it's kind of weird. I've got the urge to pull up the tracker, see where he is on campus, try to speculate what he might be doing, So I don't know. My heart is both full of joy and sadness all at the same time.
Well, that kind of describes, coming to the NFL preseason. We're full of joy because football's back, but we're full of sadness because sometimes you get to the third quarter. Like last night, by the time I got home and put on the game, the Eagles and the Browns, it was in the fourth quarter, and I was looking at it, and I'm like, I don't care enough about who's on the field right now for me to watch this.
I waited for the replay to start so I could watch the first quarter and a half that I missed.
Yeah, that's the good part. Well, a couple of news items have broken this week. The first, Treylon Burks, who some of us have high hopes for in year 2 after kind of a medium year 1, left with a knee injury. They're saying it's only going to be a few weeks. How does that hit you, Dennis?
His dynasty stock is going to be unaffected, but he was already experiencing some drop because you had to kind of buy into one of two philosophies. Chigo Okonkwo's role was not going to change with the addition of DeAndre Hopkins, and they probably aren't going to pass that much more with Derrick Henry as their running back. So that means Burks was going to take a hit. Or you could try to sell yourself on, well, now that they've got Hopkins to help kind of take some of the pressure off the running game and off Burks, Burks will be able to run a little more freely, have a little more room to operate, and should be able to still have a decent, maybe high-end wide receiver 4, low-end wide receiver 3 type of season. The injury ended up being not terribly serious, but he's going to be out of practice for, 2 or 3 weeks, which at this point in his career, after having a very mediocre year one, he probably needed all of the reps he could get this preseason. Uh, I don't know. I think I might try to see if I can buy him cheap in a couple dynasties, and I'm not in a position to draft him and redraft anywhere yet, so I'm not really worrying too much about it.
I'm still hopeful that Hopkins is going to be such a focus for defenses that it might benefit Treylon Burks a lot more than if they didn't have Hopkins. He would have been by far and away probably their best receiving weapon. So maybe he'll be able to ease into it. Second piece of receiver news, Russell Gage is out for the season, was going to be probably wide receiver 3 for Tampa Bay. What do you think this does, if anything, to their offense?
Kind of seems like Russell Gage, the Tim Patrick of the NFC. So
I mean, he definitely has been injured quite a bit. I think the first headline or the first sentence of the article I read about his injury is Russell Gage, who's been oft injured his NFL career.
I feel bad for Gage. It works good for looks good for Trey Palmer to come in there as a rookie and try to be able to make some hay there. It's really going to be about Godwin and Evans in this passing offense. They don't have good enough quarterbacking to really support 3 guys anyways. And we know Evans is going for his 10th straight 1,000-yard season. Cade Otton is a good sleeper tight end, but he's probably got a top 15-ish. Maybe tight end 15 ceiling, just because he's having to deal with Baker and Kyle Trask at quarterback. I mean, I almost want them to sign Carson Wentz. I got to be honest.
That is the second time this week you've said that, and you have to feel he's going to sign somewhere. My thought for Carson Wentz was probably someone's going to have an injury either to a starter or to a backup, or their starter is going to waffle a little bit and they're going to pick him up, but I guess we'll see. The last piece of news, Joe Mixon had an adjudication of his charges. He was found not guilty. Do you think this puts him in good shape to avoid a suspension?
He's still got another case out there with the, I guess he allegedly provided the gun that someone used to shoot at some kids on or near his property. With the NFL, you just don't know. I feel like Mixon does a lot of things right, but he also has a long history of shooting himself in the nuts. And I think he has a good opportunity to, play out the last couple of years of his time in Cincinnati on a team that's contending for a Super Bowl. I think if he does get suspended, I think we're looking at 1 or 2 games. But I also don't know that the NFL is going to do anything until the other case closes. So I'm okay grabbing Mixon and redrafting, riding with him.
So we are today continuing with our redraft rankings, moving on to the glorious position of tight end. You may be wondering why tight ends before running backs and wide receivers, and that's so that we can keep the running backs and receivers in their own week together. So we did quarterbacks Monday, and we are going to move to just the most mercurial of positions, which is tight end. We're going to be looking at our top 25, going to be doing some of the same kind of questions and deep dives that we did on Monday with quarterbacks. So I think we'll go top to bottom again. Dennis, why don't you give us your top 6 at the position of tight end?
The top 6 is really, these are the money makers, the difference makers at tight end. And there's clearly 2 separate tiers here. There's Travis Kelce. That's tier 1. And then there's Mark Andrews, I have at number 2, TJ Hawkinson at number 3, Darren Waller at 4, Kyle Pitts at 5, and George Kittle at 6. The ADP on these guys are pretty consistent. The top 3 match my rankings. But the second three, my rankings are actually inverse. So while Kittle is coming off the board at tight end 4, I have him at 6. My thing with Kittle is I think he's going to have some really, really good weeks, but he's such a ferocious blocker. They have Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, and Christian McCaffrey. So on any given week, Kittle could be the fourth option in the passing game. On a team that has a really good running game with a tight end who's a really good run blocker. And so Kittle makes me a little bit nervous in what his true opportunity will be. So that's kind of why he dropped to 6. He's a two-way tight end that has some weapons to take targets away from him. And the quarterback situation, Brock Purdy's a nice story, but he's coming off an elbow injury, wasn't known for his arm strength anyways. And while granted, he's playing in an offense that doesn't require a ton of arm strength, there's just a lot of mouths to feed there. And it's going to be a pretty high-scoring offense, I think. But I got Kittle at 6. Number 5, Kyle Pitts. That's the same as the ADP. I feel like Pitts has there's two guys in Atlanta when it comes to receivers. It's Pitts and Drake London. Bijan's going to get some run catching the ball and running the ball. I think Bijan's probably going to get 300 touches this year, pretty close to it anyways, even with Tyler Algier. They're going to run the ball a lot. That's kind of what Atlanta does. But when they do pass, it's one of those teams that it's like Tampa. There's a very narrow target funnel. It goes to two guys, Pitts and London. So I like Pitts. He's probably the best athlete of just about any tight end out there. Now he's coming off an injury. He's going to have to take a few weeks to get fully back in the game there. And then at number 4, Darren Waller is a gamble at 4. It could blow up in my face. But he's the leading, he's one of 3 tight ends that are the leading receiving options on their team. And, we've seen him be a dominant receiver. And I don't think anything's going to change in New York this year. They've got some great complementary pieces at wide receiver and Saquon Barkley. But I have Waller at 4 because I think he's going to be the top target earner in New York.
Yeah, we have much of the same people, but hardly any of the same. And maybe I went off the board. We both have Travis Kelce at 1. I don't think you can really go any other way than that. I have thought a little bit about Mark Andrews. I still like Mark Andrews, but I did drop him down a little bit. TJ Hawkinson was really good in that Minnesota offense when he came over last year. And to me, I think he ends up being kind of that number 2 option in what's a pretty robust passing attack behind Justin Jefferson. So I put him up at tight end 2. I think that's actually where he finished last year. Number 3, you talked about Waller being a gamble for you. I'm going in. I'm back in on Kyle Pitts. It's year 3. As you guys would have picked up from listening to our previews, I'm back in on the Falcons this year. I think it's Drake London and Kyle Pitts. I think we're going to see the Kyle Pitts we thought we were going to see his rookie year this year. And then I have Andrews. So, I think those guys are all great. And then I have Kittle. I share some of the same concerns as you, but he's so talented, but, obviously the 49ers have quite a bit of competition. They have Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. Christian McCaffrey is a heck of a receiver in addition to being a heck of a running back. So that adds in there. I had at one point had Darren Waller up higher, and I still like Darren Waller, and I still think there's potential that he's the best receiving option for the Giants. But I actually moved him down a little bit. I went with Evan Ingram at 6. I loved what he did with the Jaguars last year. They franchise tagged him, and then they worked out a long-term deal. I think the Jaguars are going to be another good contending team, so I have him up there. I'll go ahead and give the rest of my top 12 and then turn it over to Dennis. So at 7, I have Dallas Goedert. The third member of the triumvirate in Philadelphia. It's really about those two receivers and Goddard. Last year, he was tight end 12, even though he only played 12 games. So he's getting the volume. He gets the looks when he's out there. Number 8, I have Darren Waller. I didn't drop him that much further, but I have Waller down at tight end 8, and then at 9 I have Pat Freiermuth. I still like his fit and everything in Pittsburgh. I still think he gets red zone looks. I still like his contributions there. 10 I have David Njoku, but I have to be honest, I've been feeling a little nervous about the Browns. Preseason hasn't made me feel a whole lot better about Deshaun Watson. I hope he's still on track for where I had him projected. I think Amari Cooper and Njoku are going to be the biggest pieces of that offense. At 11, I have Gerald Everett. He was very sneaky productive with the Chargers last year. I think we're going to see another dose of that. And at 12, I have Dalton Schultz. Schultz, I think, might end up, I said, I think Waller might end up being the top receiving option for the Giants. I think Schultz could end up being the top receiving option for the Texans. So that rounds out my top 12. Dennis, what are your 7 to 12?
I agree with you that David Njoku is going to be right up there behind Amari Cooper. I agree so much that I have Njoku as my tight end 7. He's a very athletic tight end. He's a good blocker. He's going to be on the field. He's great in the red zone. I get the concern about some of the reports coming out about the play in training camp. But I saw this interesting tweet that made me think the other day, and I wish I could remember who it was. They said, it's all fun, and we all love to see clips from training camp, but, you post one rep of some guy, beating another guy, and then you want to talk about how, training camp is where you're working on technique and you're trying different things. And somebody may get beat on one rep, but they may have won the 3 before it, and they might win the 3 after it, but they decided that, they were working on something specific. So I feel like, nothing scares me more as a fan than my team going undefeated in the preseason. To me, that's just a harbinger of you might as well start look for the books and take the unders if your team goes undefeated in preseason. Find those bets and take them. So I feel like the offense is gonna run pretty well in Cleveland. I think it's gonna run through Nick Chubb. I think it's gonna run through Amari Cooper. But I feel like, I wouldn't be surprised if Njoku had double-digit touchdowns and 60 catches. So he's got good rushing, good ability with the ball in his hands. And number 8, I went with Evan Ingram. I think that, Doug Peterson has a history of using his tight ends effectively. They brought in Calvin Ridley, who, by all accounts, has climbed to the top of the pecking order in Jacksonville. And if we think back to Atlanta, that's probably where we all expected him to end up once he signed. But Evan Ingram is coming off a career year. Will he match that? I don't know. Will he get close? I think he's got a chance to be pretty efficient. He's a pretty good receiver. He's going to be on the field. I think they'll run plenty of 12 personnel. With the other tight end being the one doing most of the blocking. So I like Evan Ingram at 8. I have Dallas Goedert at 9. I initially had Goddard a couple spots higher, but I like Goddard, but the passing volume goes through Brown and Smith. They brought in DeAndre Swift, who's a really good pass catcher, and while they've used other backs in that role in Philadelphia the past few years, I don't think any of them have been as good a pass catcher as DeAndre Swift. And so for me, it feels like Swift is going to siphon off some of those Dallas Goedert targets. And Philadelphia, I don't expect them to all of a sudden, increase their pass attempts by, 10 or 15%. They're going to keep doing what they're doing. Maybe Jalen Hurts runs a little less, but that might be because Rashad Penny at 6 foot, 220 pounds is able to take some of that hardcore workload off, or maybe even Trey Sermon at 6', 215, who busted off a 33-yard touchdown last night and took a pass for 14 yards. Looked kind of pretty good against the backups, but then again, he's allegedly a backup too. So there's talk that Penny might not even make the team. And if that's the case, then I think Sermon takes that big back role and gets some opportunity there. Sermon or Penny could be this year's Miles Sanders in Philadelphia. And I think that all is going to cut into Dallas Goedert a little bit. So I like Goddard, but I've got him at 9. At 10, I got Pat Freiermuth. Honestly, I feel like I might, 10, Pat Freiermuth, I almost feel like I might be a touch high on Freiermuth. The passing group in Pittsburgh is looking really, really good. The one guy I haven't heard anything about has been Allen Robinson, but he's been slotted in to play that big slot role. Calvin Austin has come on and really, really produced after being on IR all year last year. Deontay Johnson is lighting it up. I know last week there was talk about, George Pickens' touchdown. But prior to that, Deontay Johnson, was target hogging. He had 3 targets. So I like Deontay Johnson and George Pickens. But I also think that it's going to be a situation where Freiermuth is going to have to work a little bit harder for his targets. And that's why I dropped him down to 10. I've got Dalton Schultz at 11. I feel like this is an opportunity for him to help a team change its woes, get out of, let's work our way out of the cellar. He's a reliable guy, not explosive. It's definitely a tight end premium kind of pick with Dalton Schultz, but I like him. He's been productive in the past. I've got him up there at 11. And then at 12, a guy that I'm a little higher on than the ADP. The ADP has him going at 19. I've got Juwan Johnson at 12 from New Orleans. Johnson. So here's the thing with Johnson. He's a tweener at tight end. I think Foster Moreau is going to be the traditional tight end. Johnson is going to be a big slot guy. And he may even move outside while Michael Thomas is healthy. He could be the third wide receiver playing from the tight end position. And if Michael Thomas does what he's done the last 3 years, it could be week 5 and Juwan Johnson all of a sudden is the starting big slot for the New Orleans Saints. And we've seen how productive that position can be. I like Juwan Johnson. I think there's going to be some ups and downs, but we're well into that gargantuan tier of tight ends where, Johnson's going off at tight end 19. I have him at 12, and he could finish higher or lower than either one of those numbers and not surprise me.
Yeah, after you have like that kind of real top group, there is a wide gulf. So those are our tight end ones. Then we're going to go through the tight end twos. So Dennis, give us 14, 15. I had to do math for a minute. Give us your tight end 13 to 18, which would be top half of tight end 2.
Well, before I jump into that, one of the questions we had, and we both kind of touched on it when we were talking through our rankings, was who are we most nervous about in our top 12? While I've got Waller at 4, I'm nervous about him because of his recent injury history. And then Kyle Pitts, because the offense isn't known as a passing juggernaut, despite his, Kyle Pitts had over 1,000 yards as a rookie. And then last season was a train wreck. It's season 3. If Desmond Ridder is even a mediocre quarterback, if Ridder is QB 15 on the season, I think Kyle Pitts could push for tight end 1 this year. But they both scare the heck out of me. At tight end 13, this one's going to catch you by surprise a little bit, maybe. Maybe not. I've got Tyler Higbee. Higbee's playing it in Los Angeles with the Rams. It's Cooper Kupp and then all you others. And those others basically consist of Tutu Atwell, Van Jefferson, Ben Skoranek. I don't even know who the others are after that. But let's just note that that's not a terribly serious group of wide receiver options. I like Van Jefferson as a late round pick, but I think Higbee has an opportunity. Would I be surprised if he finished as tight end 7 or 8? Not at all. I think he's got the opportunity to be a red zone threat. Cam Akers at running back has questions, and he's backed up by Zach Evans and I forget who the other guy was there. Kyron Williams is there, and there's somebody else I'm missing, but
no, because Sony Michel retired.
Right. I just think that Higbee has he's shown it in the past that he can be a solid contributor in the passing game, and Matt Stafford has shown in the past that he's perfectly happy using the tight end in the passing game. So it feels like on a team that's not admitting they're in rebuild and they're trying to make a push, that Higbee could be a real beneficiary of that. At 14, I've got Sam Laporta. I think I'm too high on Laporta, but they're going to pass the ball a decent amount in Detroit. And after Amon-Ra St. Brown, there's some question marks. You got Marvin Jones, you got Josh Reynolds, and the suspended Jamison Williams there. They just cut Denzel Mims today, so that late round draft pick swap didn't work out. So it'll be Laporta is just a much more gifted athlete and receiver than Brock Wright and Shane Zylstra. And it feels like James Mitchell is the other guy there. So I think Laporta is going to step right into the starting role in Detroit. It'll just come down to, can he handle it? I think by and large, he's going to do okay in his trial by fire season. And next year, he could easily be, a top 8 tight end. This year, honestly, I like his. A lot of people have Kincaid over him. I just like his opportunity better, and I don't know that there's probably a decent sized gap in their athleticism. I don't know that there's that big a gap in their game. So I've got Sam Laporta at 14. He's going off the board at 17. Next, Greg Dulcich. Am I silly? Am I just? It's like they completely took Albert out.
Did you see my ranking? I made a big change because Greg Dulcich isn't going to start for Denver. He's not their tight end 1 anymore.
But is he their receiving tight end?
No.
You think it's Troutman now?
It is Troutman.
So, upon revision, we'll end up probably changing that. But, I think Dulcich has what it takes to maybe earn that role. Maybe it's just a function of not catching on to the Sean Payton offense quick enough. And will there be some loyalty to Troutman by Payton? Sure. Can Dulcich surpassing? I'm going to bet on it, and I'm gonna go with Dulcich at 15. At 16, I've got I mentioned him earlier, talking about the Tennessee, Chig Okonkwo at 16. I feel like Tennessee is going to pass the ball a little bit more. While Burks might get off to a little bit of a slow start because of the injury, I think he's going to end up being a fine high-end wide receiver 4, low-end wide receiver 3 at season's end. DeAndre Hopkins will probably be in the somewhere in the between wide receiver 18 and 24, if I had to guess. Not necessarily because I don't think he can produce wide receiver 1 numbers. I just don't think he's going to get the opportunity in this offense to put up that type of number. So I've got Chig kind of maintaining his role in the passing offense in Tennessee at tight end 16. At 17, I got Cole Kmet. I've never been real high on Kmet. He doesn't catch the ball terrifically well. He's athletic enough, low volume passing offense that added a primary pass catcher to the team and looked to bring in a couple running backs that were pretty good pass catchers as well in Travis Homer and Roshan Johnson. They also signed Robert Tonyan, who we've seen in the past put up a tight end one season. I don't think Tonyan is a big threat to Cole Kmet, but he could end up, having some, being in one of those, oh, well, we're going to put Bob in for a series and then Tonyan scores a touchdown and instead of it being Kmet. So I got Kmet at 17. And then at tight end 18, I got Gerald Everett of the Chargers. Everett's, he's on a team with a lot of weapons and a great quarterback. I think if he was higher up in the pecking order, he would be he could easily put up tight end one numbers. I'm just not sure with the likes of Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Quentin Johnston, Joshua Palmer, and Austin Eckler, that Everett is just going to get the opportunity. And so that's why he ends up at tight end 18 for me.
I was like you. I was skeptical of Adam Troutman being listed as tight end 1 on the Broncos depth chart until I actually watched them play the game. Greg Dulcich did not look good.
Is it because he just looks like he knows what he's
doing? Yeah, I don't know if he's an ideal fit. And I actually think probably not this year, which bums me out because there's a whole lot of teams where I have Dulcich and I was riding on him being my tight end 1. But for me, at tight end 13, I have Mike Gesicki. He was tight end 7 in 2020 and in 2019, and he was tight end 2020, and then tight end 8 in 2021. That's what got him the franchise tag. He sort of got phased out by a new coach scheme and Tyreek Hill, but he's going to a place in the Patriots which have used 2 tight ends before. And the last time Bill O'Brien was the offensive coordinator for the Patriots was 2011, when his top 2 receiving options at tight end, he had 3 top receiving options. He used Wes Welker as kind of a slot and possession receiver, and then he used Rob Gronkowski and Aaron Hernandez. And I know we don't want to talk about Aaron Hernandez because of what he did off the field, but if you remember that idea, he has Hunter Henry. They went and got Mike Gesicki. They got a Juju Smith-Schuster who could kind of do some of those other things. I think Gesicki's in for potentially a big year, so I have moved him up a lot. I put him at 13. I have Juwan Johnson at 14. I like him the same as Dennis was talking about. He could finish higher. I think he'll at best his ADP. I have Tyler Higbee at 15. You talked about Higbee. He has always been a very reliable part of the Rams offense. He's definitely probably their number 2 passing option. I'm not as bullish on their pass offense in general this year. I still have questions about whether we see Stafford all year, but I guess we will find out. I like you have Chigakonkwo at 16. He's another guy. I think he and Treylon Burks could actually benefit from having DeAndre Hopkins come to Tennessee and not having as much of the focus be on them. At 17 and 18, I have 2 rookies. I have Dalton Kmet at 17. I'm starting to believe more and more that they are going to use him kind of in that slot role, and that they're going to use him and Dawson Knox because they don't have a lot of receiving options that they like behind Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis. So I think that they drafted him for a reason. A lot of people have talked about he's really going to play more like a wide receiver, and so I bumped him up. And then I have Michael Mayer at 18. I liked that pick potentially. I like the potential. I don't think he'll be great at the start of the season because they went and got a veteran in Austin Hooper, who I think will start. And Hooper actually had a fairly decent year last year. But I think much like we saw Okonkwo eventually displace Hooper in Tennessee last year, I think we're going to see Michael Mayer come up probably even quicker. So I have him there. I will give the rest of my. So first of all, the guy that I have probably in this group that I think could end up a lot higher, I kind of gave it away, is Gesicki. And I just think he's been a top 10 tight end before. Last year, Miami, through coach and scheme changes, realized that they weren't really going to use the tight end. I think New England wants to use the tight end, so he's my guy. But Dennis, out of that group there, who is your guy that you could see jumping up and being a top 12 option?
Honestly, it's Tyler Higbee. I would not, if Stafford can stay healthy this year, if the offensive line can play reasonably well and keep Stafford healthy, I could see Higbee putting up a tight end 7, tight end 8 type of year, you know, just because there's nobody else there. It's Cooper Kupp, and I mean, let's face it, Kupp can't get all the targets, no matter how many breakfasts he eats.
Okay, so finishing out my top 25 at 19, I have Cole Kmet. A little bit more competition at tight end with Robert Tonyan, but I'd be more concerned they have more competition for targets with DJ Moore, who looked spectacular in his debut with Justin Fields. At number 20, I have Sam Laporta, the third rookie in there. I like Laporta. I'm excited to see what happens then. Haven't quite as high as Dennis, but I still think he could be in for a good year. I like Detroit a lot this year. Number 21, I have Cade Otton. I haven't given up hope. I actually think there's a possible way in which Russell Gage not being available ends up benefiting him in terms of target share. 22, I have Adam Troutman. I don't have him higher because I think there will be something of a split, but he actually looked pretty good as the starting tight end, got quite a few targets. I think Denver's going to lean more heavily on their receivers, but I think he could have a pretty decent year. 23, I have Trey McBride. I think we'll see him take a step forward. I know Zach Ertz, they made big news about him being cleared, but I think Arizona wants to go younger and is looking toward the future. That also being said, I don't think Arizona is going to be that good, so that's why I don't have him higher. Number 24, I have Hayden Hurst. I think he was a great veteran pickup for the Carolina Panthers. Is going to be a good security blanket for Bryce Young, provided that the offensive line can ever learn to block for him. And number 25 for me is Dawson Knox. I still think he's going to contribute, but I think I like Kincaid a little bit better. So that is my 19 to 25. Dennis, who are the rest in your top 25?
So I am clearly on an island by myself in my low expectations of Dalton Kincaid. I have Kincaid at tight end 19. He's going off the board in redraft leagues as tight end 11. And I'm like, there's no way. We say what you want about Gabe Davis. Well, injuries have led to him being inconsistent. He's a very, very, very talented wide receiver. He's the number 2 on that team. Kincaid isn't going to be the number 2 wide receiver on the Buffalo Bills. And he's going to split the tight end work with Dawson Knox, who is not just going to go away. Do I think Kincaid is going to get a larger share than Knox? Yes, I do. That's why, and that's reflected in my rankings as I have Knox outside my top 25. Let me double check and make sure. Yeah, I have him at 28. I don't think there's going to be as big a split as a lot of people are projecting, at least this year with Kincaid and Knox. At 20, I've got Hayden Hurst. He's kind of been one of my buy low guys. If I can get him, I'm punting tight end in a pretty high volume offense last year in Cincinnati. He had a decent enough year, not super consistent, but he was also playing with probably the best trio of wide receivers in the NFL. He's going to have a rookie quarterback who's going to need somebody to be a steadying influence. He'll be the check down guy. He's going to be, the please somebody get me a first down guy. I think they'll still try to run Adam Thielen on intermediate routes as well as short routes. They've got a couple speed guys and Mingo, and I see Marshall's out with an injury right now. DJ Chark, that's the other guy. So I think Hurst is going to have a pretty good role in that passing game. Where did I leave off? At 21, I got Irv Smith. I don't know. I feel like I might be a little bit high on Irv Smith. Irv has always been one of those guys that's athleticism has teased us. And I think here in training camp, I'm still kind of buying into the athletic tight end finally matched up with quarterback who knows how to get him the ball. Wouldn't surprise me if he finished outside the top 25. But right now I've got Irv Smith at 21. I've got Michael Mayer at 22. I think Mayer is going to end up taking that job. Hooper is going to be the number 2 tight end there. I just don't know what to expect from the quarterbacks. Jimmy G has not shown himself to either A, be real healthy, or B, be real consistent. Devontae Adams is a guy they're going to force the ball to. They also have Jacoby Myers and Hunter Renfrow. I like Mayer to carve out a role, and for Dynasty, feels like this may be a great opportunity when he starts off a little bit slow because that offense sucks. And it may be an opportunity to buy him pretty cheap. At tight end 23, I got Hunter Henry in New England. And I just feel like Gesicki is going to be the move tight end, but we've seen New England tight ends, inline tight ends, be able to play a very prominent role in the passing game. Henry's a good tight end. He's established himself as the starter there. He's got a nose for the end zone. He's got good rapport with Mac Jones. If you're starting Hunter Henry, you're probably rebuilding at tight end 23. It's definitely not somebody you're relying on. At 24, I got Trey McBride. He was the top tight end coming out last year. Athletic tight end. Gonna be I think he's gonna take over that role as the starter. I just their quarterback situation is so up in the air. Even with Kyler Murray potentially coming back this year, I think it's a position that's ripe for McBride to take it and establish himself. At 25, I do have Gesicki. I think Gesicki is going to get an opportunity to maybe play some big slot, but that's kind of also where Juju plays, and so it feels a little bit like they're going to be redundant. And so I think as it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. Gesicki's got a separated shoulder. He's working his way back from now. I think he'll be back by the start of the season, but I feel like I don't know that he's ever going to get fully classified as a wide receiver, and he's so bad in blocking. I don't think he's going to earn enough snaps to again be a top tier tight end.
I guess we'll see. That's one of our big discrepancies. So I will ask you, who is one tight end you don't have in your top 25 who you think could surprise?
Honestly, it's Logan Thomas of the Commanders. A couple of years ago, before he had a couple of years of injuries, he had a 100-target season. He was a fairly athletic guy coming out of college, former quarterback. That team is going to need somebody in that area of the field. And if Thomas is healthy, I think he can earn targets. It'll just come down to how. I think Cole Turner is going to be pushing him. Turner was a receiving tight end out of Nevada. He's going into his second year now. I like Turner just fine. But I think Logan Thomas is going to be the starter at least this year. it's Ron Rivera. He likes veterans for the most part. He kind of had to be bullied into naming Sam Howell the starter. So it'll be interesting to watch in Washington. But I've got Logan Thomas at 27. I could see him being a top 15 tight end.
Yeah, for me, I'm going to go with Tyler Conklin. He's a guy that had a better season than you might have remembered from last year, and he's easily overlooked. Even I just went and looked. I have him somewhere down in the 30s, and maybe he won't have a big year, but you never know. And that's the one guy. It's the Jets. I won't be tuning in cheering for them on Sundays, as we've previously mentioned, but I think they're probably going to have a decent season. He could be a guy that surprises. Well, that is a wrap on tight ends, which is always a fun and interesting position. But if you enjoyed tight ends, you might enjoy next week even more. We are going to turn our attention to running backs, probably one of the most crucial and one of the most difficult positions. We will be doing our top 50 on Monday. We will do 50 to 26, and then we will look at the top 25 to close the week. Pulling a little reversal there. Hopefully on Monday, we will announce some more spots in our listener league. Dennis and I will confer over the weekend. But Dennis, if people still want to get their name drawn in the hat, what can they do?
They can, go to your favorite podcast platform, subscribe, rate, review, leave us a review, and you could end up being in the listener league.
And remember, if you throw your hat in the ring, you need to leave some open space Labor Day weekend, because that's when we're looking to draft. And we are going to do kind of a live draft, not live as in we can reach out and touch each other or slap each other, but we can give ourselves a virtual slap in the 2 minutes that we have on the clock. If we time things out right, we may even end up doing it while we're doing a show. But we shall see. Until then, you enjoy your weekend.